It's the second anniversary of Rob Thomson as the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies. And do you know what? I think it's safe to say it's been working.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I have been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now. I've done a lot of the stuff too, but it's what I love doing. And for the last 6 years, I've been a member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where I've been the host of this show. And this year, I'm hosting Locked On MLB, and I'm also hosting Locked On A's. So if you enjoy what I'm doing here and you listen every day, you say, I can't get enough of this guy. Guess what? You get 10 episodes a week if you follow me. If you want to hear about all of Major League Baseball or just the A's, do what? I can have them both covered for you. Find us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, whatever it's called now, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. If you are listening every day to this podcast or to the A's podcast every single day, and you want to make some sort of, comment on social media, make sure to put that hashtag #EverydaySully. Believe it or not, it helps us figure out who's listening to us and why. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motor. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need and the prices that you want, it's easy to bring home the big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guarantee fit only available to U.S. customers. I have to say, in full disclosure, I always call my car my ride or die. That's not in the copy. I added that because that just naturally rolls off my tongue. The trivia question we had, Scott Horstmeyer, who seems to do well. I got to have a tournament of champions because I have a rotation of people who get the trivia question correctly. The question was, when we had our Blue Jays roundtable the other day, was who was the first ever Blue Jays All-Star? And I would have literally bet $1,000 it would have been Bob Baylor, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But Scott Horstmeyer got it right. It was the veteran Ron Fairly, who the Blue Jays picked up to be a veteran on a young team. I'll tell you the reason why I would have thought it was Bob Baylor, because when I was young, and believe me, I once was, and I was starting my baseball card collection. That's why I'm right now pantomiming holding a baseball card. The Kellogg's 3D All-Stars were a series of cards that would fall out of a box of Frosted Flakes, Rice Krispies, or Raisin Bran, and you would get your 3D All-Star. And every team had at least one rep. The Red Sox had a bunch. Dodgers, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Royals, all the team with lots of superstars had a bunch. The Pirates, but it was tough to find one for Toronto. And the token Blue Jay in the 3D superstars from 78 and 80, both times, was Bob Baylor. But there you go. All right, let's get on to the topic of the day. One of the more interesting games that happened on Monday was Philadelphia versus Milwaukee. And the reason why it's an interesting game is because that's a matchup of division leaders. The Phillies and the Brewers, that's a clashing of two teams that have realistic shots of playing in the postseason. And Bryce Wilson, who has pitched pretty well recently, he's mainly a starting pitcher, although he's had some relief appearances. But Bryce Wilson was pitching well for the Milwaukee Brewers. And Dan Wheeler, who is always good, was pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies. And from the beginning, the Phillies made their statement. Sosa got an RBI single, Rojas got an RBI single, and David Dahl. Remember David Dahl? He was an all-star for 1 year with Colorado Rockies. And then it was one of those kind of kind of fluke all-star years, and he kind of bounced around a little bit. He's been in the minors. He came up, he played his first game with Philadelphia this year, and what does he do? He homers. Now, Rhys Hoskins, the former Philly, also homered, and that was kind of cool. And he came home to where he was a big fan favorite and hit a home run for Milwaukee. But the Phillies got the win, and the Phillies are already in the 40s in their win column, and they're not yet in the 20s in the loss column. I picked the Phillies to win the World Series this year. And right now the team has a 6.89 winning percentage that matches. They have an identical record to the New York Yankees. And you'll hear a little bit either tomorrow or the next day. We're going to be dropping our up-to-date power rankings and picking Yankees, Phillies, Yankees, Phillies. It's a coin toss, but my pick of the Phillies to win the World Series this year, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Even though they've only gone 5-5 in their last 10 games, they just look good. They just look good up and down. They just look good pretty much everywhere you can find on this team. And they got the good news that Suarez is, he's not dealing with a broken bone, so he's probably going to come back. But you go up and down the lineup. I mean, it isn't necessarily everyone's having the gaudiest stats, but everyone's doing their job. Harper got on base twice again today. Rojas went 2 for 3, and it was exactly as you would plan it out. Wheeler throws the first 7 innings, was dominant. Hoffman pitches the 8th. By the way, his ERA right now is down to 1.01, and Alvarado gets the save. Phillies go on to win. And it's interesting that today is the second anniversary of the promotion of Rob Thomson to manager of the Phillies. And it's safe to say it's worked out. Now, I remember I was in Philadelphia during the summer of 2022, right around the time I was there in August, and I was right around the time the Phillies were really making a move. They were a completely uninspired team for the first half of the 2022 season. Under Joe Girardi, the team was 22-29. 7 games under 500. Looked like it was going to be another bad season in Philadelphia and another completely forgettable year. And Dombrowski, who is the complete embodiment of what do I have to do to win right now, made a very gutsy move. Dombrowski, the president of the Phillies in 2022, had a high-profile, highly sought-after manager in Joe Girardi. Joe Girardi was a World Series champion with the Yankees back when they used to win championships. He had been manager of the year with the Marlins, and while he was a little bit of a prickly pear, and while he was a little bit of he wasn't a cuddly toy, to paraphrase the Monkees, he did well. He was a good manager. And his final year of managing with the Yankees was the 2017 team that stunned Cleveland in the playoffs and got all the way to the ALCS, to Game 7 of the ALCS against the Astros, banging the trash can. And they got rid of him. I didn't understand it. And then he was sought after by lots of teams. Everyone thought he might be going to the Mets, might be going here, might be going there. Said he went to Philadelphia. I remember I said, that's a terrific move. And it just didn't work. Now, I think it may work with Girardi somewhere else. I don't think he's dumb. But they promoted Rob Thomson. And I remember thinking, oh, great. Another anonymous coach gets the coaching job. And I think I spoke ill of Rob Thomson. Or I thought, oh, this is clearly just, you're on the coaching staff. You get an interim job. Well, what happened with Rob Thomson? They went 65-46, nearly 20 games above 500 under Rob Thomson. They squeaked into the postseason as the last wildcard team, just barely ahead of Milwaukee, 1 game ahead of Milwaukee, who they beat again today. And they beat the Cardinals in the wildcard series, but I knew, you knew they were all going to get clobbered by Atlanta, the defending World Series champions who were at full strength now. Nope. Phillies beat them. Phillies beat the Padres, and the Phillies were the only team to log a win in the postseason against the Houston Astros. They got two, and they took the Astros to Game 6 of the World Series. Last year, of course, they got to Game 7 of the NLCS, and they lost a heartbreaker to Arizona. And now, as if they're in full revenge mode, the Phillies have, right as of right now, they are tied with the best record in baseball and are firing on all cylinders. And that decision, a gutsy decision, a decision that said throwing, throwing bad money after good and keeping Girardi where it wasn't working. We also wasn't working. It isn't that Girardi's a bad manager. He's a fine manager. It just wasn't working in Philadelphia. And suddenly you put Rob Thomson in, and in the way that people describe playing under Rob Thomson, it's the whole just go play. He's not a micromanager, just go play. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. You need a change of dynamics. I talked a little bit the other day in Locked On A's about how when Ed Figueroa, who was a star pitcher for the Yankees, saw how tight everyone was when they were playing under Billy Martin, and suddenly when Bob Lemon became the manager, everyone played super loose. Sometimes a change of culture is what's needed. And it's, I believe, should be seriously looked at by a couple of teams who are currently contenders. Why? Because the trip to the playoffs is so jam-packed, they should be studying tapes of the 2022 Phillies. All right, let's hear from our friends over at FanDuel. Now, it is a fabulous time to be a sports fan right now. Not only you got baseball going on now, you have the Stanley Cup Finals all set up. I'm going to root for Edmonton. I have nothing against the Florida Panthers. I just think Canada deserves a cup. And then you have the Celtics versus the Mavericks, which would be a really fun NBA Finals. And every day you got baseball going on. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, do what it is? It's America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, where is your hub? Where is your centerpiece for catching all the best sports stories? Now it's time to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed to bring you the biggest sports stories you can find. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, takes, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. You take a look at the standings in the National League right now, and something struck me. And I talked about this before. The Phillies, the Dodgers, and the Brewers are all playing above 600 ball, and the Braves are not far behind them. And then after those four teams, you have an absolute logjam. The Padres, Cubs, Cardinals, Giants, Diamondbacks, Pirates, Nationals, Reds, and the Mets are all separated by 4 games in the loss column. The only 2 teams that are playing sub 400 ball are the Rockies and the Marlins, who are dead in the water. But every other one of those teams, the Cubs right now have a losing record. So the Cardinals, the Giants lost the game with Pavin Smith hitting a walk-off home run for Arizona, who is currently a sub 470 team, and yet are only 1 game out in the loss column of a playoff spot. We are beyond a third of the way through the season, and this is the exact time of year you have to make a big decision, make a big trade, because you can't wait too long, because then the trade deadline's up. But this is also the time of the year where you have to say, if we're going to make a managerial change, why wait? Look what happened with Philadelphia. When Philadelphia did it, they did it in early June. It's not working. Pull the ripcord. And maybe that's the jolt that one of these teams can have. I've been saying in the American League, they have to change the Blue Jays manager. But how long are they going to have Bell with the Reds? The Reds could contend. Do you know how I know that? They are 27-33. They're a 450 team in terms of winning percentage, but they're only 2 games out of a playoff spot. And you have seen, by just using the Phillies as an example, that what can happen if you truly take advantage of the situation and don't play it safe. You don't play it safe. Now, in 2022, when the Phillies made the move for Rob Thomson, they did it at the, what was it, the one carry the one. It's about 51 games into the season. Let's just say 50 games. And about 50 games into the season, the beginning of June, it was 51 games. The Cubs, the Phillies were one of the worst teams in the National League. Only the Cubs, Marlins, Reds, and Nats were worse than them. And of course, the best team in the National League were the Mets, who at that time were in the top of the heap and would actually finish the season with a losing record. I digress. Oh wait, no, they did make the playoffs. I'm sorry. The previous year they had a losing record. They made the playoffs. Doesn't matter. The Braves wound up winning the division. And for the rest of the way, only the Mets, Braves, and Dodgers had a better record than Philadelphia. You have 3/4 of this, 2/3 of the season to take advantage of this and to see where you land. And I was thinking about this for a second. One of the teams that is not a contender, but has an intriguing trade chip, are the Colorado Rockies. Who is the trade chip I'm talking about? Is it Elias Diaz, their all-star catcher? Is it Randall Grichuk? Is it is it hoping to get something out of Chris Bryant? No, it's Bud Black. Sometimes you see an instance where a manager has a sense of stagnancy, and you look up and you go like, hey, you have a new lease on life. You have a chance to manage back in the postseason. Bud Black is not a spring chicken. Bud Black is, he's going to be 67 years old late at the end of this month. He is a former Manager of the Year winner when he managed the San Diego Padres. And he had success as a manager with the Padres. He grabbed a 90-win season for San Diego in 2010. And guess what? He had a 91-win season with the Rockies in 2018, where they were just 1 win away from winning their only division title in their history. And that would have probably changed the trajectory of the playoffs that year, but I digress. He's on a Rockies team that's been strip mined. And while there are some interesting players on the team, they're not going to win piddly-poo this year. They were a 103-loss team last year. They're probably going to lose 95 to 100 games this year. He's going to be 67 years old at the end of the month. The idea of him sitting through another rebuild, yes, we've seen that teams can turn around fast. We saw it with the Diamondbacks and the Rangers last year. But let's say you're a team that's in contention and that needs that new manager. Say the Reds. In comes, you make the deal, you trade for Bud Black. You get Bud Black and say, hey, do you want to manage a decent team this year? Have a shot at the playoffs? It usually doesn't take a giant acquisition, but there have been instances where teams have traded for a manager. And sometimes it's when a manager desperately wants to go somewhere else, but they're still under contract, and so they work something out. Lou Piniella was the manager of the Mariners, had a lot of success with the Mariners, but he really wanted to move back down to Florida because he's from Florida. He wanted to live there again. And so the Devil Rays, they're called the Devil Rays then, traded Randy Wynn to Seattle, and they got themselves Lou Piniella. When Ozzie Guillen wanted to leave the White Sox and manage the Marlins and the White Sox worked out a deal where there was a player compensation. I'm just going to throw the Reds out there because to me, they're one of the most egregious instances of someone who needs a new manager. I would have said Ollie Marmol with the Cardinals, but the Cardinals, despite their loss today, are starting to play better. So if I were a Cardinals GM, which I'm not, I would say, okay, let's see how you do. Let's see how you do. But the Reds, to me, are one of the most obvious choices. And you put Bud Black on that team. I'm not saying he's the second coming of John McGraw, but pull off a deal. Get it, take a shot. Because sometimes that changes what you need. Sometimes that change, as we saw with the 2003 Marlins, when Jeff Torborg was relieved and trader Jack McKeon became the manager, off they went on to win the World Series. Sometimes a change is exactly what you need to do for a team. And maybe a manager like uh, Bud Black, who sees this as a final real chance to get to the postseason, at least tell me why I'm wrong. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Okay, let's give you a quick reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day, with the local experts of Locked On plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channel app. Interesting series of games are going to be happening in Los Angeles over the next few days because the Pirates are coming into town. And Jared Jones, who's pitched very, very well. He got one bad start there, but he's pitched very well. Bailey Falter has pitched well. He's going to be throwing this week. And Paul Skeens, who's pitching like the ace we all thought he was going to be. So all three Pirates young pitchers who are giving them a tiny bit of hope. I don't think they should make a managerial change there, but it's not exactly working either. I don't know. I'm all for it, but they got those three starting pitchers. They should be contending when you're throwing starting pitchers out there. So it's going to be an interesting week to see the games unfold in Los Angeles. Going around the horn, the Mets held off the Washington Nationals in an 8-7 slugfest. You had JD Martinez got into a big, doing. I mean, don't understand why teams didn't hire him earlier. He got a double, drove in a run. Vientos hit a home run, and McGill pitched. Well, not great. The real star was not the person who got the win, was not the person who got the save. The real star was Adrian Hauser, who wound up pitching 2 1/3 shutout innings out of the bullpen. Didn't get a win, didn't get a save. All he did was save the game. Grayson Rodriguez wound up out pitching Gosman. The Orioles beat the hapless Blue Jays right there. Oh, our dear friends over at Locked On Blue Jays, they can't be happy about that. The Reds clobbered Bud Black and the Colorado Rockies. So maybe today wasn't the day to say that the Reds should consider dumping their manager for the team that they just beat up. Candelario got a home run, so did Stevenson, and Steer went 3 for 5 in that game. The Tigers held on and beat the Texas Rangers 2-1. The Astros wound up making the Cardinals wet the bed. Astros wound up unloading home runs in the 8th inning and a 4-run 8th inning to win the game. The Padres somehow lost the game to the Angels, And then, of course, I mentioned the Pavin Smith walk-off home run against the Giants. And then tomorrow we got a full slate of games, no day games going on during this week. And we'll see as the collection of great pitchers are going to be pitching against the Dodgers, as Jones is going up against Glasnow, which would be a good pitching matchup. Which brings us to today's trivia question. I talked a little bit about trading for managers, and it's happened. It's happened a couple of times. What is the only time that a team has traded for a manager and that next year, the manager's first year with a new team, they went on to win the World Series? That's a good trade. Write down the answer right here at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram or on the YouTube page. Talking about managers, talking about how it worked. A managerial change worked for the Phillies 2 years ago today. Maybe it'll work for someone else. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.